No, you're not reading this slide wrong. We are here talking about the mean stack, but in order to understand what's so interesting about the mean stack, we should spend just a little bit of time focusing on the LAMP stack. Now, if you've been in the business for any amount of time, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the LAMP stack. That is a clever acronym just to define the open source technology stack you're using to build up your web application. You're using Linux as the platform. You're using Apache as the web server. You're using MySQL for the database, and you're using Perl or Python or PHP for the UI. And the important thing about this technology stack is you can swap out these individual pieces. Again, I still consider myself using the LAMP stack even if I'm using Postgres instead of MySQL. These are meant to be highly cohesive, loosely coupled bits of technology. Now, of course, if you begin swapping out too much, you might have a different acronym you need to pay attention to. For instance, if you swap out Linux for Windows, and of course, if you're on Windows, you might be tempted to swap out Apache for IIS. And if you go so far as to swap out MySQL for Microsoft SQL, all of a sudden you're no longer on the LAMP stack, you're, and hey, don't blame me. I didn't write this. This is on Wikipedia. You're on the WIMP stack, of course. Windows, IIS, Microsoft SQL. Yeah. So there are lots of different stacks out there. And if you haven't been to highscalability.com, I highly recommend it. Highscalability.com. I call this architecture porn. Because what you have is all of the major websites out there, Google and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Flickr and YouTube talking about what technology they're using under the covers. Many times this is written by the architect or team lead, so you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth. So if we look at something like YouTube, we can see that they're using the lesser known APALM stack, but it's still applicable. Okay, I'm sorry. That's as good as the jokes are gonna get. If you don't laugh now, you're gonna be really disappointed throughout the entire talk. The APALM stack, of course, is the LAMP stack, but rearranged. They're still using the core components, Apache and Python and Linux and MySQL. And if you go to highscalability.com, you're going to see variations on this theme over and over and over. Now, another place for you to go looking for details on what the big kids are using out there is netcraft.com. Netcraft.com. Because this isn't based on surveys or based on interviews. This is actually based on the metadata, the details that the server is reporting back. So if you're ever curious about any of these websites, you can go to netcraft.com and say, I wonder what wikipedia.org is using. And you go and look, and of course they're using the LAMP stack as well, Apache and Linux. Now, Netcraft also allows you to move from the micro to the macro. It allows you to go in and see that, in fact, since the beginning of time, or at least since the beginning of the 21st century, Apache and Nginx have been the two most popular web servers, and they combined account for over 2/3 of the active websites being served up on a solid, ready for prime time LAMP stack. So, of course, the only reason that these pieces of technology work so well together is because they're highly engineered by a single entity to make sure that they work together perfectly. No, that's not it at all, is it? In fact, really what this LAMP stack is nothing more than a glorified bucket of bolts. And I don't mean that as a pejorative, I mean that as a compliment. It's wonderful because we're standards-based, so I can mix and match whatever pieces I want. We can call it best of breed, or you can say you've got a mutt of a technology stack, but either way, you're able to swap these pieces in and out. This is not a monolithic stack. In fact, this is a stack that's best defined by an author, David Weinberger, when he wrote his book, Small Pieces, Loosely Joined. Oh, if you haven't had a chance to read David Weinberger, I highly recommend it. One of his more recent books is called Everything is Miscellaneous, and it's talking about searching and indexing and good things like that. But he wrote this book, Small Pieces Loosely Joined, when the web was still new, and we need to explain how the web works. And so I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he starts his book by saying, now let me get this straight. You can get HTML from one server, yes. And you can get CSS from another server? Well, yeah. And you can get images from a third. MP3s from a fourth. Yeah. JavaScript, Of course. In videos? Yes. And that's all legal? Well, of course it is. That's how the web works. It is small pieces loosely joined. Now, again, moving at a higher level, when we look at what web development looks like in the 21st century, I would no more go out and write my own credit card processing service, or mapping service, or video service, than I would write my own string class or write my own operating system. My job as a modern web developer is to go out and find these highly cohesive services. If I wanted to mash up something that's geographically oriented with videos, perhaps I want to build up a map of where all the YouTube videos are being published all around the world, and I wanted to charge for it, I would put together a technology stack like this, highly cohesive and loosely coupled. So no matter how powerful and important programmers want to think they are, no matter how much they try to convince you we are out on the savannah hunting woolly mammoth, in fact, it's a little less glamorous than that. We are hunters and gatherers. We are wandering the savannah looking for tasty little morsels, tossing it into our knapsack, and hoping that we've got enough gathered up for a feast at the end of the day around the campfire. But this is what modern web development looks like. Finding best-of-breed libraries out there that we can incorporate into our stack. And the reason I mention this is because it's almost the antithesis of what most managers are looking for. Most managers are looking for a single vendor solution. They like saying we want one check to write, but what they really mean is they want one throat to choke. They want one vendor to be responsible for all aspects of the website. Someone that handles persistence and security and replication and user interface. All of these kinds of things, we will want a single vendor solution. And here's the truth, I would love that as well. But you know what? It doesn't exist. We have another name for this single vendor all-inclusive solution, don't we? Yeah, a silver bullet. It doesn't exist. But that doesn't stop us from continuing to look for it. And in the unholy alchemy that goes on in pointy-haired boss's mind, somehow once you find that silver bullet, it turns into, yes, a golden hammer. You're familiar with this metaphor, I'm sure. Maslow's hammer. He said this famously back in the 1960s, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And again, this is what most managers seem to be looking for. When they say, we are a Java Oracle shop, they have found that hammer. And what is a golden hammer? Well, once you have a golden hammer, you stop even looking for nails. It is the one true web framework to rule them all, appropriate for all solutions that you're going to come across. And again, it simply doesn't exist, does it? So when you're evaluating web frameworks, when you're looking for solutions to your problems, not solutions that meet your existing tool set, be sure that you're looking for a web framework that favors extensibility over completeness, that favors a rich, robust, active plugin ecosystem over core features. I told you I was a Grails developer for years and years, and what I loved about Grails, as I worked with it from 0.3 to 3.0, I found that release got smaller and smaller and smaller with each subsequent release. And that's a healthy sign. That's a sign of a good web framework, because what Grails was doing as they went along were core pieces that were fundamental, that were highly coupled to the framework, got spun out as plugins and options and add-ons. So as Grail became cast strength, it became more and more refined, more and more distilled, since it was a pure essence of a web framework. We find that the plugins actually bring more functionality as the core functionality goes down, because you have the ability to plug in and modify and make sure that this framework truly does match the solutions that you're looking for, not simply the tools you already know.